Hello everyone and welcome back to How Many More Articles Is This Guy Going to Read at Me? Where today we have the final Dev Insight preview article. We're going over ability tuning, sandbox stuff, overwhelming majority buffs here. Pretty specifically focused on supers as well. There are some other slight ability tweaks that are coming, but a lot of this feels very, very focused on supers and buffing super damage or super utility, things like that. There's a couple of minor PvP nerfs that are in this article, and they say one solitary PvE nerf. Let's just go right into this sucker. Solar gunslingers, hunters, we're starting with you. They want to make gunslinger damage more impressive. Celestial Nighthawk has historically been a staple more than it hasn't been in the PvE meta. And we know that Still Hunt is getting a buff in Renegades. So they are also buffing Golden Gun. Deadshot and 6-shooter. Damage against non-boss combatants increased by 15%, against boss combatants by 26%, removing the disparity between boss damage and non-boss damage. Golden Gun projectiles now scorch targets at 40 stacks at base, so if you hit a bunch of shots, you're going to probably trigger some ignitions. Honestly, the biggest convenience thing here has been this bug. When fired inside a Well of Radiance, Golden Gun now counts as Radiant for increased damage. Hopefully, no more hunters having to step out of a Well of Radiance or getting their own Radiant in order for their Golden Gun damage to be buffed as Radiant. This has been an issue for such a long time. We've had to literally plan damage strategies around the fact that someone would be dropping a well and that hunters couldn't be standing next to it. So this for me is like one of the bigger convenience things, because that was just annoying. Blade Barrage getting a 39% damage buff. Haven't really been seeing that much Blade Barrage. This is a good move. I would love to use Blade Barrage more. It's just, you don't really have that many opportunities to, although you would think, with Golden Gun being a bit slower, that maybe Blade Barrage as just like a one-off super has more of a chance, but Golden Gun has just historically been a bit better outside of like a couple of scenarios where Blade Barrage is better. They're also buffing knives, explosive knife, weighted knife, lightweight knife, knife trick. Against red bars, 50%. Against other enemies by 36%. Lightweight knife had its crit multiplier increased to 1.5. This is going to make knife builds a little more enjoyable, rewarding more headshots. It rarely feels good to throw a knife and get a headshot on an enemy and it's like super juiced up and it doesn't kill the enemy, right? Like if you get a precision hit with a knife, you really want to make sure that thing dies in one single knife, because otherwise like your rhythm can get thrown off and all that kind of stuff. So I like this buff as well. Next, another buff that I do really like, Acrobat's Dodge, the class ability that not a lot of people use outside of very special circumstances where you can give Radiant to your teammates. Increased passive energy regen rate in PvE by 112%. We've literally never seen a 113 and we never will. Cooldown now matches Gambler's Dodge, so you can actually use this ability with some amount of frequency. Really like this for people who want to play a little more support-like. And then Gunpowder Gamble is getting a buff. Honestly, didn't even think that it really even needed it. I think Gunpowder Gamble is really, really good, and apparently I'm the only person who ever plays with Gunpowder Gamble, but I love Gunpowder Gamble. Shooting the dynamite in midair now increases damage by 50%, 5% in PvP, expands the radius, and creates sub-munitions. I already liked this ability, man. I already liked Gunpowder Gamble as it was, thought it was good, thought it was very impactful, and now they're making it do 50% more damage. Okay, sure, I'll take it. I love Gunpowder Gamble. This just makes it even more juicy. I love it. A lot of Shadowshot buffs here. A lot of super damage buffs, turning it into one of the highest damage supers in the game. We'll get to that in a moment. Tether Source now attaches to combatants on direct impact with Deadfall. So if you hit something, you hit a boss, the boss moves around, it should be dragging that tether with it now, instead of just the tether hitting and it just stays in that spot for its duration, which is... I'm not sure. Like, it sounds like a convenience, but like sometimes, like maybe you don't want it. You don't want to hit your target. because it does move around and you want your tether to stay in a certain spot because like maybe there's some ads spawning in the spot, so you want to keep it there, but it accidentally hits a target. So it could be good, it could be not good. I kind of put this in the middle. I kind of put it neutral because it just kind of depends. Increased weaken effect from 30 to 35%. It is now the strongest weaken in the game, and it now immediately weakens and suppresses enemies in an area of effect on impact instead of you shoot the shot, it lands, and then it pops. This should now hopefully just, you shoot it and it just pops immediately and everything is suppressed very, very quickly. I know people have been asking for that for a very, very long time. It seems like now Bungie is actually delivering on this. Mobius Quiver, so that's the one where you have multiple shots, a little more for damage dealing as opposed to, area of effect, crowd control, anything like that. While the super is active, dealing damage now increases the power of subsequent shadow shots and bow weapons. This puts a bar on your screen that charges as you deal damage. When charged, your final shot or final 2 shots with Orpheus deals significantly increased damage, turning it into one of the highest damage supers in the game, 227% max. Mobius Quiver is not like a super slow super either. Like you could put out those shots pretty quickly. And I definitely want to go over a lot of these super buffs when Renegades actually comes out, because I feel like it's kind of tough to contextualize how much more damage these supers are going to be doing just by like going in game and then trying to add things up. So I definitely want to take a look at some of these supers because some of these are getting pretty high up there. You know, we got Warlock with Metaiodoxia getting a buff there, and its super damage might be going crazy now as well. A bunch of these Hunter ones. So we'll do another round of testing in the shooting range when Renegades actually comes out to see, where we're at. Base super duration increased from 10 to 16 seconds, so they're giving you way more time with Quiver. And Orpheus Rig goes to 20 seconds, giving you even more time in case you want to be a little more methodical with your shots. Then we're moving to Smoke Bomb. Increased projectile lifetime after sticking to a surface from 3 to 9 seconds. Reduced lingering smoke time in PvP from 5 to 2 seconds. As someone who has been who has suffered the brunt of many a smoke bomb, I'm not exactly sad at that, especially when trying to like shoot one that's been on like a wall or something. Like you want to try and get rid of it, but it just stays there for way too long. In my eyes, way too long. For other people, maybe not long enough. Reduce screen effect intensity and duration while an enemy smoke, and reduce damage against players by 16%. They want it to be more of a misdirection, crowd control type thing, as opposed to, giving you a bunch of damage head start on your opponent, really. Again, I'm not going to speak to any sort of PvP notes because I haven't played PvP in a long time. I can only tell you as a Titan how much I have suffered against smoke bombs in PvP. So for purely selfish personal reasons, good. Next up, we have Arcstrider. Not too many changes here. Storm's Edge, passive energy regeneration increased by 25%. A lot of people are using Gathering Storm. It's really good. It's a one-off. It does a lot of damage. There just hasn't but over the past, I would say 2 or 3 years, the effectiveness of roaming supers has, it's not really there as much unless they're doing insane amounts of total damage. There was one time where you would want to maybe use Storm's Edge, and that was in Sundered Doctrine on the second boss for like maybe some solo stuff. But even then, I don't even think you really needed to opt for that. So yeah, Storm's Edge, being able to use it a little more often. If it's not going to do as much damage as all these other things, I got to be able to use it a little more often, which I think is cool. And then Tempest Strike, reduced damage against players by 16%. Again, not going to speak on that at all. I have not touched PvP in a very long time, but I'm guessing this had to have been some kind of a problem for Tempest Strike. Probably one of the more infrequently used aspects over its lifespan to get some kind of a nerf. Stasis is only getting a couple of changes as well, but they are pretty big. The super, Silence and Squall, increased damage against combatants by 63%. Historically, you would want to use this as more of a crowd control, area of effect control type super, just freezing everything, giving yourself a little bit of a breather, against whatever you're going to be dealing with, dealing lots of shatter damage. But now they seem like they want this to actually deal some damage on its own as well, which, okay, I mean, well, again, just another thing that we need to test in the shooting range as soon as it actually is available to us. And then we also have Shatter Dive. Shattering stasis crystals or enemies now grants frost armor. Any shatter grants full stacks in PvE, 2 stacks in PvP. Yeah, you don't really see a ton of Shatter Dive in PvE, I feel like. I feel like if you do see it, it's more of just like, I want to use Shatter Dive as opposed to I need to use it, or it's like an integral part of my build. So now you can build a little more defense with Shatter Dive, you know, because you are putting yourself in occasionally a vulnerable spot. Let's say you throw a glacial grenade out at some targets and you want to dive bomb them. Well, if they don't die and you're in some higher difficulty content, you're just kind of leaving yourself vulnerable. So now you can have at least a little bit of defense coming out of the Shatter Dive. Get a few stacks of Frost Armor, some nice damage reduction. Maybe you combine that with the Smoke Jumper 2-piece set bonus. You know, maybe there's an orb waiting for you out there. You get a big damage reduction, something like that. So it's a little more enticing to get in the fray with some more risky Shatter Dives. Next up, for a strand for thread runners, we have a somewhat significant Widow Silk buff here. Currently, it gives you an extra grenade charge, and your grappling hook creates a grapple tangle at the grapple point. That is all it does. I mean, an additional grenade charge for some more grapple melees is already, like, not too bad, is pretty nice. Looking at a grapple tangle for a short time now overrides your grenade ability with a free, non-offensive grapple. This allows you to give grapple capabilities to fellow guardians who don't have strand or grapple equipped. Also works for the navigator. So it's like they looked at grappler, the modifier on some activities, and they were like, what if we just made that a thing that hunters could do? Grapple tangles created near the ground now rise into the air shortly after creation. Grapple tangle base lifetime increased from 15 to 20 seconds, and hitting an enemy with a grapple melee that wasn't free now creates a grapple tangle. So they are really pushing the mobility, the maneuverability of Widow's Silk to another level. I mean, it's already not too bad to create a grapple tangle, especially if you're running the navigator, right? You can do it very often. But this is just pushing it even more full throttle in that direction. I'm not as much of a movement Andy as some other people. And I feel like it might be tough to really grasp the full capabilities of something like Widow Silk just looking at it on a screen and just looking at it in text form. But I'm very interested to see, you know, what some of the capabilities are going to be for Widow Silk. Kind of like when we were talking about like Winter's Guile and all those melee buffs that are coming. It's like, I know some crazy things are going to be able to be done with this. It's just tough to conceptualize until we actually get in game and really see how often you're going to be able to maneuver around with grapples. So very interested to see how creative people get with something like this. And then Silk Strike, the super, which was already, I think, pretty good, increased passive energy regeneration by 11%, and you're getting a little more damage resistance in the super, 13% more damage resistance, increased damage resistance. Yeah, I already thought the super was pretty good. I was not anticipating anything significant happening to it, but you're getting a little more energy regen. You're going to be able to cast it a little more often, and you'll be a little more resistant while you're in it. And then finally, for all hunters, specifically your dodges, marksman dodge, you're going to be able to pick up ammo from a bit farther away. But gambler's dodge is getting a bit of a reduction in PvP only, reduced melee energy gain from 50 to 35%. Looking at data, gambler's dodge has double the usage of marksman's and has an outsized impact on crucible kills per minute and win rate. Without seeing a lot more other information and without a lot of anecdotal experience for myself, I'm going to take them at their word on this one. Hunters, you can feel free to chime in, but it seems like Bungie thinks Gambler's Dodge is enabling hunters a smidge too much in PvP. Next up, we have Solar Warlock. Dawnblade is getting a 20% damage buff, which I'm not even sure is enough. I haven't used Dawnblade in an incredibly long time, and projectiles now scorch enemies by default, so hopefully you should be seeing a lot more ignitions. We talked about this a little bit last week, about how Dawn Chorus is getting some of its innate properties just thrown into Dawnblade at base, because they've both, quite frankly, been left behind in the sandbox that we're in right now, which is basically like, I don't know, sandbox 5.0, 6.0. They've been stuck in like 3.0, 2.0. So very nice to see Daybreak, some offensive Solar Warlock, getting some juice because Well of Radiance and Song of Flame are just still incredibly, incredibly good. So I am very interested to see if Dawnblade is going to make any sort of a comeback at all. 20%, again, just feels kind of low reading it, but I have not used Dawnblade in a very long time. I don't have damage numbers in front of me. I don't have damage numbers compared to other supers. So again, all stuff that we are going to test. Next up for Voidwalker, we have some super buffs. Nova Warp, they keep giving this thing some juice, and it's just never really getting to the point where it's able to compete or be, like a top tier option. So charging the primary attack now pulls enemies towards the Warlock, so it's going to be a little bit easier to actually get that big AoE blast off on multiple targets, or as many targets as you can feasibly get in the radius of it. Increased primary attack damage by 15%. Dark Blink now releases weakening Seekers, so they want you to be blinking around, doing an attack, blink again, hit some more weakens, and that combined with the primary attack damage boost should give you a nice chunk of damage, and you should be more reliably hitting your targets or hitting more targets as you blink around. I've used Nova Warp somewhat recently just as like a for fun factor, but it definitely is, it struggles in the toppest of top tier content. So I'm looking forward to seeing if Nova Warp is actually worth a damn now. Vortex now repeatedly pulls enemies towards it during its lifetime. I do want to see how much of a gravity well this is going to be creating. A lot of people just use Vortex for the damage over time. And sometimes it feels like Nova Bomb even pushes enemies away based on impact. So yeah, I want to see how strong is this? Is it going to be sucking in enemies from like 20 meters away into the radius? You're going to be able to combine that with maybe like a tether to really juice how much damage you're doing. We'll see. Next up, we have Arc. We talked about Storm Dancer's Brace last week, and we were waiting for some Storm Trance information to see how good of a change this is going to be. Maximum sustained damage bonus increased from 50 to 65%, which seems on the lower end, but again, just another thing that we need to really kind of get a feel for in-game. And then increased landfall jolt duration from 10 to 16 seconds. Okay. My thing is been not necessarily with landfall, because I do think landfall is, fine. I think it's fine. It's really just been like the super damage itself. So again, plenty more testing to be done. Chaos Reach getting a 20% damage buff against combatants. I think my brain is still skewed from how ridiculous Arc Warlock was during episode 3, Heresy. And so for me, I'm just like, did we need this? Is this, I'm like, again, I'm not going to say no, right? But I'm just thinking about like, I guess it's been a few months and I haven't really touched Arc Warlock that much, but okay, just a little surprising to see, but maybe I'm just out of the loop. As I have not really been on Arc Warlock that much. I haven't really even been on my Warlock that much, generally speaking, in the Edge of Fate era. So, my favorite change right here, though, Arc Sentry no longer blinds the user on creation. Let's go. The amount of times I have flung an Ionic Sentry and it's like bounced off an enemy, or it's bounced off a wall and it hits me right in the face, or I've had to like try to throw it and then swing my camera away so that I don't accidentally blind myself. It's been dozens, if not hundreds of times. Probably one of my favorite changes of all the patch notes. And then Lightning Surge reduced damage against players by 16% on Prismatic only. I know Lightning Surge is quite strong. Few builds that use Lightning Surge. What do they call it? Electric Slide. But I also know that it could be, people are getting hit pretty hard by this in PvP. So this, I'm not terribly surprised to see this. Next up, Stasis, Winter's Wrath. Bungie says it right here. It's never been about the damage. I really don't know what it's been about, honestly. Maybe more of a PvP thing, because it hasn't really been about that much in PvE outside of some very niche setups that people have tried to make work, and then they maybe one time worked. Increased Shadow Wave damage against frozen targets by 210%. Brought up the DPS to make this competitive with other roaming supers. And then we have a Frost Pulse adjustment, reduced player freeze radius from 7.5 to 5 meters, and now slows players in between 5 and 8 meters. And this is so it can compensate for the fact that Warlock can now move while casting it, which we're going to talk about in a second. Yeah, you're going to be able to move a little bit during Rift cast now. And next up, we have Broodweaver, Needlestorm. We already know that this is getting some extra juice if you're going to be using Metaiodoxia, as we talked about in a previous video. But now they're making this like a little bit smarter because, you know, sometimes if you're aiming at one of these higher priority targets, bosses, mini-bosses, champions, but there's a bunch of other enemies nearby, you usually want to put the full brunt of the super into that one target. And then sometimes they'll just kind of scatter and then they'll only do half damage. And they're like, oh, the champion lived, and they just pop their shield or whatever. And you don't get a chance to kind of damage them again. So now just needles are smarter. They're going to prioritize the big boy targets as opposed to some junk enemies if there are bigger targets around. Do I call this a buff? I don't know if I call it a buff. I don't know if I really call it like a bug fix or anything. More just like making the abilities smarter. So it might be a buff in certain situations. It might actually be annoying in some other hyper-specific situations. But yeah, they're just making it a little bit smarter. Next, Healing Rift, Empowering Rift can now be cast while moving at roughly half speed, and they increased the rift radius from just under 4 meters to now 5 meters. Aimed at making the Warlock less of a sitting duck when they need healing, we're also giving Empowering Rift even more love, because this has already gotten some pretty insane love. Increased melee and grenade recharge rate while standing Empowering Rift by 20%. They really want you to use Empowering Rift. I thought it was finally getting to the point where I was actually tempted to use Empowering Rift. Evidently, still not enough for Empowering Rift. I often cast my Rift while moving or while sliding to give myself a little bit of momentum going into casting a Rift in case I am in danger. So moving at roughly half speed, I mean, you're still going to be moving kind of slow, but maybe it's just that extra little edge to like get you around a corner or get you behind some cover so that you don't insta explode. And then in PvP, they are reducing Healing Rift heal rate by 10% in order to kind of counteract the fact that you can now cast it while moving. You're a little more slippery. You don't have that same vulnerability that you usually do when putting down a rift, because, I mean, you can be killed if you're in line of sight of someone and you're putting down a rift. If they catch you, you can just be killed outright. So now you're a little more slippery. You can be a little bit safer, so they are taking it easy on that, on the healing to compensate for that, which makes sense. And they say they're going to be keeping a light touch, reducing this rate, and they're going to keep some tabs on it. So hopefully, if it is too much of a problem, if it ends up being too much, even though it's only 10%, hopefully they can adjust it. Moving to Titans, this is actually another one of my favorite patch notes from this. Hammer throw impact damage now increases with range. The damage increase is purely additive. The base damage is unchanged. Do really want to see how much of a damage boost this is. But, you know, a lot of times going after those super long throws, those long shots, you could do it, but your damage was most of the time going to be pathetic, and then you'd have to run all the way the hell over there to grab your hammer again. It's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time to go for those super long range hits. So I wish they gave us some numbers here. I want to know how much this scales with range, or maybe just infinitely scales with range. I do like to see this, and I know Panoplia, the new exotic, the Thor return. Maybe you see a little more usage of that. I know it did get some adjustments, but I thought it created like kind of a slow gameplay pace. So maybe now those long range throws are a little more worth it. I hope they are, because it is very fun hitting those super long range throws. Sentinel Shield for Void Titan has now been brought up to today's standards. They're doing quite a lot to Sentinel Shield. Standing behind the shield now periodically reloads all weapons every 2.5 seconds. Now grants Void Overshield to allies behind the shield. The damage bonus is coming down to compensate for a lot of these changes, from 40% down to 25%. Blocking attacks now extends super lifetime, which I was surprised was not already built into something like Urza Furiosa or something like that. Blocking attacks and protecting allies now charges shield throw damage, puts a bar on your screen, similar to something earlier. that charges as you block attacks and when your allies are behind your shield. When it's charged, your shield throw deals more damage, resets the bar. So you want to charge up that meter, get a shield throw off for a big chunk of damage, and then bring your shield back up. Very interested to see if this is going to do anything for the damage overall meta, because we already have the ability to cycle through all of our weapons pretty quickly with Envious Arsenal, right? A lot of damage strategies revolve around some of the rotations through all those weapons. We have also Still Hunt getting a buff. We have Izanagi's change getting reverted, so your reload speed is scaling with the, cramming 4 bullets into the gun, right? So I am interested to see maybe like machine guns, maybe like a Thunderlord situation kind of comes back, because Thunderlord got hit because now you actually have to reload the thing. I think it is at least one time getting through all your bullets. That's kind of what hurt Thunderlord the most. So maybe now Thunderlord is getting some juice. Maybe this could even be some kind of a replacement for a Well of Radiance Warlock. That's maybe some wishful thinking there, but maybe now Void Sentinel Shield could actually come in place of a Warlock and provide hopefully similar benefits that a Warlock Well of Radiance would be providing. I think a lot of testing is going to be done on this. I'm very interested to see what ends up happening as a result of this, because I do think this could be as impactful as like changing entire metas, or potentially as not impactful as people just continue to ignore Sentinel Shield, because we just don't really need defensive supers in the overwhelming majority of the game, because offense is just so strong right now. Striker Titan's only getting 1 change for Fist of Havoc, which I already think is like not really that great. Light attacks now increase the next heavy attack's damage, so you want to go light, heavy, light, heavy. Before, you really didn't want to do anything with this thing because it was not very good. I need to see how much of a damage increase the heavy attack is. We will test it when Renegades comes out. Next up, we have a small nerf. This is the only PvE nerf in the entire article. Howl the Storm, which I got to test out recently. Howl the Storm got a very, very nice buff, but evidently it was dealing a little too much damage in some cases, so they are increasing the super energy costs from 5 to 15% if you want to use a Howl the Storm while you're in your super. I thought using Howl the Storm was a lot of fun. I do like to play a lot of Stasis Titan right now, especially while the artifact is still very, very juiced up on Stasis. Next season, I probably won't be playing it as much because it's not going to have the same amount of benefits, but I do really like Howl the Storm. I did not really get to test it while in my super or any sort of, high intensity moments or anything like that, so I don't have as much of a comment on this, but for Bungie to do, I feel like any nerfs right now, something's got to be really out of band for them to be like, okay, it's a bit much. Finally, this is a PvP only change to the Banner of War aspect. Melee damage bonus against players now scales with stacks instead of always being at full strength. Response to player feedback that Banner of War's melee damage bonus is oppressive to fight against. Unarmed melee can now one-shot players at 2 stacks with 200 melee stat, or 3 stacks at base stat. So I think they were just trying to tone down how strong some of these melees could be with even just a single stack. Fortunately, it does not affect PvE. Banner of War will continue to be an absolute menace over there. Finally, we just have some more overall changes coming to like grenades and fragments and smaller things here and there. A suppressor grenade no longer suppresses the user if you mess up throwing it. That was always kind of annoying. You could also look at it as like hey, that's the risk you take running suppressor grenade. Make sure your grenade throws are good. But I don't think anyone's going to be sad about getting rid of the ability to suppress yourself. They're also increasing the detonation damage by 10%. Okay, was mainly using it for the suppression, but that's fine. Spike grenade can now attach to combatants. I think lightning grenades can also do that now. This one I was a little surprised at. Reduce the negative stat of Echo of Undermining from -20 to -10. That's where your grenades, your void grenades weaken targets when they are hit by said grenade. I always kind of thought of like, it being a massive penalty because it's providing you a really, really strong effect, right? The ability to weaken, because the ability to weaken can chain into other things proccing. So I was a little bit surprised to see this, be adjusted up. And Void has more negative stats than the other damage types, so we eased up on the penalties. I mean, I would argue it has more negative stats because it provides so many really strong effects, like Devour, for example, right, is one of the strongest effects in the game. Weakness, also an incredibly strong effect in the game overall. So that's why it had. So I'm actually a little surprised that they're easing up on some of the penalties. Our goal for subclass build crafting is that there should be clear trade-offs without feeling punitive. I mean, I always thought that was the trade-off, right? Is like, I'm going to have slightly weaker stats, but I'm going to make up for it in all these bonus effects that I'm going to be getting, right? So, okay. I mean, again, like no one's going to be sad about buffs, right? No one's going to be sad about any of this. I was just a little surprised to see it. I didn't think it needed that much of an adjustment. So, invisibility, updated visuals to be slightly more visible in Crucible. Response to Crucible feedback that invisibility is too effective. Okay, I want to see what it looks like, because I have it pretty clear in my mind what someone looks like while invis in the Crucible. So let's see. It would be nice to have like a picture here or something like that. Enemy VFX now scales with overshield's remaining health for overshield, added to allow players to eyeball how much overshield an enemy has before deciding to engage. So a stronger effect means their overshield's really strong. Weaker effect means they don't have as much left. Just a nice way to be able to tell, like, what am I up against here? Do they have a full shield? Do they have a weak shield? Do I think I can win this fight? Because generally speaking, you see someone with an overshield, you just turn around and like, nope, not fighting you. I'm waiting for that overshield to go down. Now you can make a better judgment call, which I think is nice. For Arc Flashbang Grenade, also no longer blinds the user, increased detonation damage by 10%. Again, was mainly using it for the blinding, but I'll certainly take some damage. This is a great change here. Threadlings that lose their target before impact will land and look for another combatant instead of exploding. The amount of times that I will see like 7 Threadlings all dive bombing the same red bar enemy that dies to a single Threadling, and you just lose them all. It's the worst. It's the worst feeling when you're on some sort of a Threadling build, seeing all your Threadlings just pop on like the blandest of enemy. I love this change. This will reduce cases where a big gang of Threadlings all explode on a single dread. They should feel smarter and more alive. Yes, the amount of waste, the amount of Threadling waste, it just always felt terrible. So having these be a little bit smarter means that Threadlings are going to be doing a lot more damage overall in general pieces of content. And combined with some things that are going to be coming up, very, very excited to be running some Threadling builds in Renegades, because we did a video on them pretty recently. I do like them now. Now they're going to be made even smarter, and some other things are coming that I'm going to not spoil here. Threadlings should be a lot of fun in Renegades. That is your final Dev Insight patch preview. Looking forward to Renegades in terms of all of these changes. I want to explore a lot of these changes as we usually do. Again, we will test all the super damage changes. I'm sure literally everyone under the sun is going to be testing those changes. But very interested to see where that all lands, if we're going to have any big shakeups, even though there's a lot of things that are already like really good. There's not just like one thing. At least, if you're just more of a casual player, just doing like a casual run of the raid, you're not speed running or anything like that. You're going to have a lot more options, which I think is very nice. It's nice to be able to just run with anything, and you're going to be as effective as something else, right? So I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you next time.